You're listening to the MindPod Network. Hello, friends. There is no grand CIA conspiracy to prevent you from supporting this podcast. Really, there aren't. All those little guys in black suits and thin black ties really do want you to take out your credit card and buy stuff on Amazon through the Amazon portal on zachleary.com. That, in turn, supports this podcast. So I'd really appreciate it. And God bless America. It's all happening. 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 Welcome to the podcast, friends. Episode 95 of It's All Happening with Zach Leary. That is me, your host. I'm so happy that you're here. Episode 95, very cool. This week we have Ani Easton Baker on the podcast, and she's an incredible human being who spent most of her career so far, anyway, being an educator and primarily working with students who have mild to moderate disabilities. So most of our conversation, not all of it, but most of it was about the education system. So we'll get to that in a second. And and thank you, everybody. You know, the last couple of podcasts, I definitely used my little forum. I mean, you know, that's what this is for sure. If you start a podcast and primarily bring on guests and who are experts in topics that interest you, it basically becomes your own little forum. And of course, it's I really am so grateful for the community. But I did use my little forum to get personal the last couple of weeks, no question about it. And I really appreciate those who did write me and sent me messages of love. So I'm not going to talk about that this week. You know, I'm still here fighting the good fight. But let's talk about education. So we talked about this on the podcast, but one very compelling, I would say, schism in the matrix between the public education system, or the modern education system, as it were, and the way society is changing in terms of the employment sphere and what people are actually doing with their time. There's a huge disconnect. So prior to the 1840s, the American school system was mainly private and decentralized, and homeschooling was very common. And kids who were really primarily raised on the classics and literacy. The literacy rate was very, very high, and things like that. But it was decentralized. There really wasn't a system. And then as the Industrial Revolution, was already firmly in place, but as it continued to grow and really dictate the economic factors within American culture and what people did with their time, a formality began to take place. And then in 1902, John D. Rockefeller created the General Education Board, which he put in over $100 million into that, which went to funding for major school systems across the nation. But what's so interesting about that, and take note, is that John D. Rockefeller was a very famous industrialist. And the education system and the way that it is tiered and the general curriculum that is taught and the tracks that are applied to your whole journey throughout K through 12 and all of that is really based on the response of the Industrial Revolution and churning out workers who either needed to farm or go work on the assembly line, because that was the American way. So fast forward all of these years later, well over 100 years later, the basic backbone and structure and scaffolding that makes up the American education system is very much still the same. So as the United States Labor Board has a statistic, which we've mentioned on the podcast before, that 60% of all children in elementary school today will work in a job that has yet to be invented. That is a very, very important metric if you really stop to think about it. And the big issue with that is that the education system, as it currently stands and as it has stood for the last 100 years, does not sync up with that. It is still trying to turn out people for the Industrial Revolution to go work in factories or 9-to-5 jobs or things like that. Of course, Montessori schools and Waldorf, and there are different models that are bubbling up through America that provide an entirely different foundation for how we can teach each other. But very, very much worth noting, and I think that is a huge part of the problem. So something worth thinking about for sure, as we need to match both ends of the spectrum. One side of the track of society can't continue to grow and expand and change and morph into all these incredible things, while the other still stays in the traditional sort of, trudging the road and just churning out math and science and reading K through 12 and going, standardized testing on all of these different things. So worth thinking about if you're at all involved in the education system or have any children. Stop and put that in your pipe. So yeah, Ani Easton Baker on the podcast. I first heard her on the Michael Donovan podcast, and I just gravitated towards her. I really like the way she thinks and speaks and looks at the challenges of the world around us. And I wanted to talk about education specifically, and I've been meaning to do that. So it was perfect timing. And if you go to her site, AniEastonBaker.com, you can see everything that she's up to and learn more about her teaching history and the documentaries that she's working on, and what an incredibly creative and cool soul she is. So enjoy the podcast. Ani Easton Baker, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Ani, actually.
Ani? Mm-hmm. Oh, shit. That's a terrible way to start.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm very used to it.
Ani. Okay. That's funny. Is it Ani DeFranco?
It's, yes, I am Ani DeFranco.
No, but
like her, but not, I wasn't named after her or anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, because because she's the only other person I know who's A-N-I, right?
I know. Yeah.
Ani. Okay, good. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate
thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. I crossed your path by Michael Donovan, listened to your podcast there, and for a while I have been wanting to dig into the education system on the podcast. I'm a product of the Los Angeles Unified School District. Mm-hmm. I went to high school kind of down the street, actually. Mm-hmm. My high school's down the street. And so, let's start there. We'll talk about a lot of things, but you spent how many years?
12.
12.
Yeah.
And mainly focusing on special ed, right?
Yeah. I was also educated in the public education system as well. And I'm curious about your experience, being a student of it. I worked in Monrovia School District, which is not in LAUSD.
Sure.
So I've heard the horror stories, and I was told, you're so lucky because you're going to be working in a smaller district. You're not going to have the issues that LAUSD has. And I don't know because I haven't worked in LAUSD, but I certainly had my share of issues. It was not run well at all. So I think that.
But with it not being run well at all, specifically around, a lot of ways to go there, but specifically around special ed.
Yeah.
I feel, and is it true that, sadly, that, maybe special ed within the school district is just sort of a microcosm of how kind of special ed and disabled people are viewed in society.
Absolutely.
It's kind of marginalized.
Yeah,
sadly,
they're very marginalized. I think that's a fair way to look at it. I guess to answer your original question and go into this in a linear way, at 18, I started working in classrooms as an aide in special ed classrooms, and I loved it immediately. I've always been good with kids. Even when I was a kid, as a fifth grader, I would go help the kindergartners. I always wanted to help people younger than me to develop. And so I loved it, and I felt like I found my purpose. I found my calling. I found my passion. It really fulfilled me, and I was really good at it. And it required me to be really flexible because I started as a substitute aide, actually. So I was in different classrooms all the time, working with tons of kids with tons of different eligibility categories, which is sort of the PC way to say disability. And I learned so much just about humans and behavior and motivation and adaptation and how impactful a positive environment can be on an otherwise like incurable, quote unquote, disorder. And so I went to school and I got my credential and I started teaching, and I taught for 12 years in the public school system. And the people I went to school with and or the teachers I worked under as when I was an aide all were like, good luck. We give you 5 years. There's such a high turnover rate. It's not an easy job. You're going to peter out. It's rough. And I said, that will never happen to me. I don't care about the politics of it. I'm going to make it work in my classroom with my kids because I love the kids and that's what I'm there for. And I'm sure it's a shit show at the district, but I don't care.
Right.
I'm just going to go to the meetings, and if people are complaining around me, I will just tune it out. Like, you know, I was very pure when I started.
Build your own reality.
Totally.
Yeah, sure.
And I kind of had to also. Like, not only did I want to, I went into an empty classroom 2 days before school started. There were no desks, no chairs, no books. And they said, we hope that we'll have the stuff you need by day one. And I was 2 desks short. And the whole first year, I'm going to say year and a half, I did not have books at all.
What?
No curriculum at all.
Oh my God. So what do they expect you to do in that situation?
Sort it out. It's crazy because it depends.
Just make it up?
Yeah. I went on the internet. I looked at the standards for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade because I had all 4 grade levels in one classroom. And I made my own little standards binder and I created lesson plans. I had to sort of like pick and choose what I thought was important to teach. And I bought worksheets online. I subscribed to so many teacher websites, and I just created lessons.
Wow.
And I printed stuff out every day. There no books, but like I would go to the library at the school.
But in a way, I know how fucked up that sounds, but in a way, I could almost also seeing that as being, hey, well, that's kind of cool. I mean, because you could blue sky. I mean, you just could kind of make it up and teach them cool things. There
were aspects of it where I thought, I don't want to complain too much because I don't want too much regulation because I'm such an intuitive person. And that's sort of like my biggest strength and kind of superpower with working with kids who need extra help. Is that I can tune into what it is that they need, and it might be off book, but I'll figure it out and I'll do it. So there was an element of freedom where I was like, good, I'm glad that they're not going to tell me what to do because I'm better if I'm able to come up with it. But then there was also like, but I would love just like a set of books that would be really helpful to just pull from even.
Sure.
And it was exhausting, but I wasn't exhausted because I was still exhilarated by, it was my first year. And it was the beginning of my career.
So just for the sake of conversation, and maybe it's the same in Monrovia as it is in all school districts, I don't know, but how is special ed defined?
So there's mild to moderate, and then there's moderate to severe.
Okay.
And there are 12 eligibility categories, and depending on how typically or atypically functioning a kid is, an IEP team decides if they belong in the mild mod, which just means more typically functioning. Like we are in a mild mod environment that I taught in. We're trying to get them ready to go back into gen ed. They might just have a few difficulties here and there. And then if we address those needs, they'll probably be able to be in a gen ed environment. Mod severe is like Rett syndrome, sometimes nonverbal kids who will never be verbal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Down syndrome, more severe physical and mental syndromes that's just sort of solidify the fact that they need to be learning, but they're not going to be educated according to the standards because it's unrealistic. So, and how a kid qualifies for special ed is they're put through a series of tests. And if those tests ultimately show that there's a gap between what they're able to do cognitively and what they're doing, that means that they just need to be educated a little bit differently. So we put them in a special ed classroom so that we can close that gap and then get them quickly back into gen ed as soon as possible. Ostensibly, that's the idea.
Okay.
But it's a lie. That's not what the program does at all. The program traps them in special ed and will never let them out.
Okay, and it does that because, like, why do you think?
So I have to say that's a little bit of an exaggeration because I do have kids who grow exponentially and slowly start mainstreaming and then ultimately eventually are fully mainstreamed and they're back in gen ed. However, that's not because the program helped them do that. It's because they really, at a certain point, became ready themselves. The reason that the program fails them is because you can't have 4 grade levels of kids in one class and expect them all to get a complete education.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they're always behind. Always, always, always. Like, I can't teach them everything.
Right. They're always playing without a full deck.
Yes.
So to speak.
Exactly.
Right. So in the way that, it's almost like how a doctor, has, what do they call it? The Hippocratic Oath. There's sort of like, an oath that, you have to do no harm.
Yeah.
And, you're here to do some kind of service as well as it being a profession.
Sure.
Is there kind of a mentality within like the school districts as, we have to help these people? Or is it just sort of like, we don't have to help these people. Well, we have to help these people, so let's just do it by default, and we're not really going to,
I think,
do much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I found is that both mentalities exist within each person at different times in their career.
Okay.
I saw, so in my 8 years of actual teaching, 12 in classrooms, 4 as an aide, 8 as a teacher,
Wow.
I saw there was such a high turnover rate of, like, I'll talk about the special ed department, the heads of special ed, the behaviorists, the school psychologists, right?
Yeah.
So you get to see someone begin their career in a new position. Like, I saw, I think, 4 people in the 8 years that I taught appointed to the position of head of special ed. And that person comes around and they say, this is how I'm going to help. Here are all the things that haven't been done and I'm going to do them now. And I see, oh yeah, it looks like you're really struggling. Let me do something about that. Week 1, they're all of a sudden, they're like inundated with the impossibilities of all of the holes, like filling all of the holes in the program, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm going to come check in on you next week. You literally don't see them again for 5 months. And when you do, they look completely different. They're not kind anymore. They don't promise you anything because they know they just literally can't do it. They can barely keep up with the day-to-day demands of being in charge of all the schools in the district and all of the problems within each classroom, within each school, not to mention like parent issues and testing and the stuff coming at them from higher up.
The death of the bureaucracy.
Exactly.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
It kills them.
It does.
Right.
And I watched it happen. I watched it happen to an administrator. I watched it happen to a lot of people. And it was interesting because I had the same question you just asked me. I'm like, do these people care? Because, like, why don't I have books? Like, that to me is villainous. That's evil. Like, do they really want us to fail? And to be able to see, I guess, people begin a new position in the district so many times and then just dwindle, or be slowly crushed by the demands of the position made me realize, like, yeah, everyone has good intentions, but the system, it fails everyone. It's not possible. Yeah. The goals outlined aren't they're not able to be achieved.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's set up to fail.
Yeah. And then the goals expand and the budget gets cut every year.
Right.
It's the worst.
Yeah. I mean, that whole end of it, the whole budget discussion thing is one of the most frustrating aspects of the American system at this point, because we're operating from this viewpoint, and you especially hear it in the Republican platform, and especially now with Trump as scarcity. We don't have enough. We don't have enough. And we got to cut, and then a $56 billion increase in military spending at the same time. So, I mean, it's just this.
What's important.
Yeah, right. What's important. So it's just this view that we have in America within the political system of scarcity. Yeah. And that's we've created, but we've also operated from that from so long now that we're operating from debt, and we spend our money so poorly. Yeah. And it's just so sad. Yeah. But I would also from just a evolutionary standpoint though, and not around education, but around, like, say, special education. It's like, in, a couple hundred years ago, or even, I don't know, maybe more than 100 years ago or 100 years ago, I mean, we would take these people and just lock them up for their whole lives, right? I
mean, before IDEA was passed in the 70s.
That was just the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit. I
didn't know that. It's so new.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I thought it was like 30s or 20s.
No.
Oh my God. Yeah. So we would just, there were asylums and institutions, and you just lock people up, and that
or like
was
a shed in the back of a school. Kids were like dying on campuses because of the way that they were disciplined by their teachers.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Every time someone brings that up, I have this flashback of a story I read about a teacher who rolled her student up in a carpet as punishment, and he just suffocated and died in there. And he was a special ed, because that was the environment of a special ed classroom. It was like pandemonium.
Yeah, I mean, that might as well be the year 1450. That might as well be the Dark Ages.
Exactly. That's why you thought it was so long ago that it was past. Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah, that's not that long ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is completely fucked up. But through all of this time that, 12 years working with these folks and 8 years as a teacher, what do you, what's your sort of position and your point of view on sort of mentally, what's the politically correct word? I don't even know to refer to mentally challenged people. How do you refer to it these days?
There are so many different words now and overall. So instead of saying mentally challenged, intellectually disabled is the term to replace mentally challenged.
Intellectually disabled. Okay.
Except that's a very specific term. So that just describes one type of, like, that is the new term for what is quote unquote mental retardation, which is a thing. Like, there are some brains that aren't not going to develop past a certain very low point. Like,
and that's just the way it is. Yep.
Right. And this person will always mentally be like 2 years old. That is intellectually disabled. But I like to say students with special needs, leading with the word students rather than special needs. So I just say that.
Students with special needs. Okay, cool. So as a whole, though, I mean, seeing, all these people and they're in the school system and they grow up, what do you think is the best role, the best sort of, just the best way for society to integrate them? Like, I mean, do you have a point of view or an answer? Because I do think about that a lot. And sometimes, I just was, I was in the supermarket just a couple weeks ago, and, there was a person with pretty severe Down syndrome, kind of looking for cereal. Yeah. And she asked me, she wanted me to help find the Special K.
Yeah.
And and it was just so sweet. And I just was thinking, gosh, I don't know, and sadly I don't know. It's like, where does this person go home to? Like,
totally.
What do they do with their day? Like, what happens?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think that it starts early, and I think it starts with integration and exposure and normalization. I think that those things are very important. When I stopped teaching last year, our district was moving toward full inclusion. This is what we were told. So the goal was that within a few years, there would be no delineation between gen ed and special ed. There would be two teachers teaching a classroom full of all types of students, and everyone would exist really well together.
Oh, wow.
And I have so many feelings about that because, on one hand, I think that absolutely should happen for the majority of the day. Let's say like 4 hours. But I also still think there should be like 2 hours of the day where kids who need to be taught in a specialized way by people who are trained to teach in a specialized way should be taught that way in smaller environments.
Oh, okay.
So, but that inclusion model is beautiful because it's, it's like the first time you see a new type of disorder that you've never interacted with before manifested in a person. It can be jarring for anybody. We just want to move past that first shock of like, what is this? Why are you so different from me? It's a very human and I think reasonable reaction to notice that someone is different from you and take that in sort of a bewildered way. I think that should happen when the kids are really small. So everyone should be really included. And I also think that there should be, and I tried to facilitate this. I had two administrators. The second was a lot better at including my students with the rest of the campus. With the first administrator, I was like, we need to do some assemblies where we talk about differences between kids. Because what I'm noticing is in my classroom, I'm teaching my kids to socialize, right? We're doing extensive role-playing games where it's like, this is how you go up and ask someone to play. And it's hard for kids with autism, let's say, to do that. Yeah. So we go over it, let's say, for a couple months, and it's all practiced, and they're ready to try it in the playground, and we go out there and we watch them. We're like, oh, he's going to go ask him to play. And then you realize, oh, I only did 50% of the work, because once he goes and asks that gen ed kid to play, the other kid's going to say no and run away.
Oh, right. So what happens after?
Yeah.
Yes.
The other kids need training too.
Right. That's exactly.
Yeah.
You can't put all...
Kids are so weird about differences. Like if you're not wearing the cool shoes, they'll bully you.
Oh, it's awful.
It's awful. And I think it has to be targeted directly with like assemblies or programs across campus that aren't just anti-bullying, but very specifically, everyone on this campus is different. Let's talk about them openly. Let's compare and contrast because it's real. We all see it. Let's talk about it, not in a negative way.
Yeah.
But just in a real way and interact with it in a positive way. And then, have like mentor situations like that big brother, big sister thing is great. And I think if that starts young and I think if special ed kids are not separated as much as they are right now, then that I think that's the cure. And then, as they grow, those sorts of inclusion opportunities will just continue and nobody will think that it's strange that their neighbor next to them, needs to make these sounds while they're eating or whatever. They're just going to be used to it. It's just about normalization.
What's the metric within the school district? Maybe it's the same for society as well, but how many students are special needs? Like, what's the percentage in Monrovia? Was it like 5%? Is it or less than or what?
I don't know what the percentage is. I'll tell you how many. We had 2 special ed classrooms on my campus, a kinder through 5th grade campus. I had 9 students, and the 4th, 5th grade class had like 8. So what is that like? That sounds like 2%. It's low. Okay. It's low, and but it also depends. Like it varies. There have been years where I've had like 14 students in the classroom, but it's.
Yeah. Okay.
Always changing, but low.
Okay. Now shifting to, so I wanted just to, for a second, that was just about the special needs aspect of it, but now switching just to sort of like the macro education system view, I guess, how many schools are in Monrovia School District?
8, I believe.
Okay. But yeah, it's still, and I consider it, it's part of the greater Los Angeles area. Yeah. I know it's its own school district.
Yeah.
But big question. It's tough to deal with. I'm a product of the LA school district, and gosh, I went to high school right down the street actually. Yeah. And, at that time, I'm 43 at that time, there were still, little remnants of an opportunity, you could still go to that school and kind of graduate and go to, it was still a good school, but you kind of started to see like the bigger problems start to happen kind of just right when I was kind of leaving. So aside from money, or maybe is money just the biggest, is that the biggest thing?
No.
Where do we start? How do we start? Cause, and we've all heard it a million times. My mom says this all the time. When she went to public school in Scarsdale, New York in the 50s and early 60s, our schools were palaces.
Yeah. There were no problems at all.
There were no problems.
Kids respected their elders.
But they all, like 8 out of 10 kids went to, Ivy League schools from Scarsdale. They were really good schools. It wasn't thought of as that. And the only reason you went to kind of an uptight private school, and she's from Scarsdale, which was, very affluent.
Yeah.
The only reason you would go to an uptight private school was only because if your family was super wealthy and stuffy, and they were just exclusionary. They were sort of like straight off the Mayflower, Daughters of the American Revolution thing. And that's just what you did. But nobody thought about public, private. You just went to public school.
Yeah.
You just went to the school. So what happened? How do we fix it?
So as far as like how we fix it, and as far as like where the problems are coming from, money does matter.
Yes.
I remember when I was first teaching, I went to a Ruby Payne seminar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ruby Payne, but it's all about how to teach kids from different socioeconomic backgrounds and how to recognize that a lot of behaviors just have absolutely everything to do with the money that they were able to be raised with. So like, the money impacts everything, not only like the supplies that, the schools have access to, but the behavior and the feelings and the sort of like foundational stability of everyone that's in the program as well.
Right.
So money's huge.
Yes.
But I tried to change everything that I could from within the system by just finding holes and trying to fill them. And I did that in various ways. Like I tried to set up I guess it doesn't really matter. I tried to start a website to reach out to other special ed teachers who I didn't have a chance to have meetings with because there was no communication between special ed teachers, to share ideas with them that I found that worked for me in the classroom, and then they could share ideas with me via this website. And I had all these roadblocks, and the district wouldn't allow me to email it to other teachers in the district because of like legality and all of these things. That's just one example of a way I tried to change the system in little ways until I finally realized, like, there's no change in the system. It is what it is. The only thing that I think there is to be done, which I want to do in the future, to be honest with you, is to start new school systems. And I'm an advocate for Montessori and Waldorf. I'm even an advocate for the possibility of charter being a really, really powerful and impactful system, because my mom works at a charter school that is run exceptionally well. It's wonderful what they do for those kids there. But like the way that I would structure a school foundationally in every single way differs from what the public school system does. And so I don't think there's any fixing it. I think that it's going to be about new types of programs and ideas popping up outside of the system, because the biggest issue with it for me is that we treat everybody like everyone has the same type of brain. We completely ignore the theory of multiple intelligences, which is not to be ignored.
Right.
Everyone's brain works. There is no such thing as stupid.
Yeah.
Everyone's brain has a function, and it's either serving that function and you just don't know that that's valuable because you're raised in the public school system and you're taught that, being really good at math and science and reading are the only valuable things. Oh,
I see what you're saying, how you're sort of putting value to intelligence and not differentiating stupid or right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That's hard for me personally to accept and recognize, because I'm very much like, raised intellectually in an intellectually superior household that looked very much, down on dumb people are fucking shit up, man.
Yeah, I know.
Look, they're fucking it up. And currently, I say that all the time. Look, they elected this moron.
So, and everyone feels that way. And I've had to sort of try hard to not call people stupid anymore. I think that people are, I think people are often in the wrong position for the type of brain that they have. Donald Trump, great example, but he's not a stupid man. Are you kidding me? He's not. He's good at some things. He shouldn't be the president, but like his brain serves some functions
very, very well.
Very well,
and some
right?
functions not very well.
Exactly. Yeah. He shouldn't be the president.
I don't think he has a high IQ. I bet he does not have a high IQ, but I think he's very savvy, obviously. He's street smart, and he understands what he needs to understand to be successful exceptionally well.
Right.
But I think his IQ is very average.
I'm so disconnected from the idea of like a high IQ being the only important thing, I guess, because of my career, though, or not the only important thing, but something that we just like, that's what we herald as being a good brain, and then the other brains are deficient brains.
Yeah,
and that's because here's the thing. I had a classroom full of geniuses, but I just had to tap into whatever category they were a genius in.
Of course. Yes.
And I like, but saying that too, I also think there is something to people having more capacity or to use their brains more fully, and then absolutely choosing not to do that, not to feed their brain, to poison it with garbage, to never challenge themselves, to never learn and grow. That to me is stupidity. I think it's a choice, though. I think if everyone used their brains and was championed from a young age by a different type of system to figure out what it is that makes them feel alive, makes them feel capable, makes them feel fully functioning and what they're good at, that's how you build a functioning society, because then everyone is contributing in the way that can help other people, because they have this unique strength. We should be able to tap into it.
Everybody has something to offer.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's no question about that. And as we now know from about the school system, and generally the way that the public school system is structured in America, it's based off of the Darwinian morphing into the industrial age need for, how the population will best serve us. I mean, it was built off of that, and we're still operating it. It's, it was built to churn people out in math, science, reading, and go be good factory workers.
Yeah.
And then of course farming too, the agrarian age.
Right.
We're still
there.
We're still there. And that's why I'm glad you mentioned Montessori and Waldorf and stuff, which is completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. And that idea is great. And it is fair that everybody does have something to offer.
Yeah, totally. And intellect, I mean, having a high IQ and, being an intellectual and being absolutely brilliant where you just blow people away with your intelligence all the time. And,
Sure.
Great. Like we can all sort of very easily see that that's the enviable type of brain. But I think maybe even the fact that we hold certain types of brains above others is a product of the school system too. Like what?
Yeah. I hear you. I do. But it's still, it's still to me, that would be sort of a change in the value system
completely
of how we just look at each other,
That's what I want to do.
Yeah. And compassion, and just, and all of these things.
Yeah.
But again, Trump shouldn't be president.
Oh, I mean, absolutely still. Not.
Yeah.
And to be fair to you, this sort of pledge that I made to myself to no longer call anybody stupid is very recent. And I had to challenge myself by applying it to the people that I think are the dumbest. And he was obviously at the top of the list. And it was kind of my way of being can I stick to this idea that I think that I believe in? Yeah, I guess I can. He is good at achieving the very terrible things that he wants to achieve. You kind of, I have to look at the inner workings of this human thing rather than just the person that I know him as and try to unpack that and figure out what the fuck is going on. And could his brain be better served in a different position? Absolutely. But then well. Yeah,
I hear you. But is that's... It's a really good pledge. I wish I could do it. I just 30 minutes before you got here, there was some mainstream newspaper, the Denver Post or something, covered seriously an article on flat earthers. Yeah. And how it's growing.
Mm-hmm. A couple of my friends are flat earthers.
And I just, I replied you guys don't even give this. Yeah. Don't even give it coverage.
Right.
It's just it's too far.
Sure.
But
think about there's got to be a flat earth theorist or advocate or whatever we call them that could come.
I call them morons.
A flat earth moron who would come in here and outshine you in 4 other categories of performance. Right? Sure. And because that person's brain is meant to do those things well. It's fine that they're not an intellectual. It's fine that they're not into science or whatever. That's just not their thing. That's not what they're here for. Not everyone is here for everything.
Yeah, that's fine. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my battle cry. I would love, it's similar to the Montessori, I guess, Waldorf environment. Montessori to me is too loose in a silly way.
Define Montessori for, I only know besides, friends with kids in Montessori, but I don't know enough.
So to be fair, I have never visited one or observed it firsthand. So I'll say that. I'll give you an example that I think defines what the Montessori program is. A parent that I knew had 2 sons in Montessori school. One of them started reading at age 5 or 6. All of the kids in the program, it lets the kids tell them what they need. So you can, if you want to go to school and do nothing all day, you can do nothing. But their theory is that every brain and every person will tell you what they're here for. And then we just feed them in those areas and help them achieve their genius in the areas where they want to get better. It's very similar to really what I hardcore believe. In this one case, one of her sons, he was 9 years old and he wasn't reading anything at all, could not read. And all of her friends were like, dude, get your son out of this school. He's 9 and he can't read. That's embarrassing. This isn't the right program for him. The Montessori officials were like, no, trust us. When his brain is ready, he will read. He's not deficient. His brain just doesn't want to read yet. And they waited. And then he got ready to read one day and picked up Harry Potter and just read it without help and completed it. And so they, that sort of a story, I think that encompasses the whole issue pretty well because it includes like the fear of the kids being behind, but then their insistence that no, there is no such thing as behind. It's just, he'll tell us what he needs. And then it ultimately ends up being successful. That's the idea.
That's a good idea.
Well, and even that, though, I think that works for certain types of kids really well. I also don't think that the public school system, I should maybe say this, is bad entirely. I think that some people absolutely thrive in it, and it is what they need. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just not what everyone needs, and I don't even know if it's necessarily what most people need. But I also am speaking from being a teacher of alternative minds. Mostly, I've worked in gen ed classrooms too, and taught summer school and taught after school programs for gen ed kids, but most of my experiences with these alternative minds. So I'm such a champion of that.
Well, I mean, it's back to this idea of what, the public school model was based off of. And, this is coming from the Department of Labor, even. I mean, completely a mainstream statistic that 60% of all children in elementary school today at this moment will grow up to work in a job that has not yet been invented.
Wow.
I mean, that's insane. So, as the world is changing around us, I mean, literally working in jobs that have not yet even been invented, but we're working off of this, this institutionalized education model that has been the same essentially for 125, 30 years.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a huge disconnect here. We have to reinvent. Otherwise, we're just going to, the model is really great if you thrive in a public school here in LA and you make AP classes and you're good at math and science and history and reading and creative writing or whatever, and you go off to a university and you get it, that's fine, but that's not the map anymore.
Right.
I mean, look at you. I mean, you quit this, why'd you quit?
Few reasons. I was pursuing documentary filmmaking on the side. My first project was actually going to be about the special education system. I thought this will be the way that I get everyone riled up and we'll protest and we're going to change the laws. And it's obviously a lot harder than that. And I started a change.org petition to, I think that the law in public school should be that special ed kids are educated with their same aged peers. I don't care if you have to bus them to different schools to make up a classroom of 8, but like a teacher should have a full year to teach kindergartners in a specialized way, a full year's worth of kindergarten curriculum. And I think that I can't imagine someone arguing with me logically against that. Like there's no reason that wouldn't be more beneficial.
Yeah.
So that was my battle cry. I just didn't have the outreach. I didn't have the platform yet to get 100,000 signatures so that it's even like looked at, by officials at the White House, whoever looks through those petitions that come their way, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this won't be my first project. And then I had this other idea, which had nothing to do with special ed and is all about sex ed and how we educate our culture about sex, or how we don't educate our culture about sex.
Yeah, right.
And how
the latter.
What?
The latter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And how kids are educating themselves via technology. And I'm not for censorship at all. Great, fine. Watch your porn on your phone. I would have done it too. But time to swoop in and talk about it, because this is like one of the most important issues that affects everyone's lives, is like their sexuality and how that's going to inform their lives and how they use that as a weapon against each other or not, hopefully. My big thing is we need to be more inclusive. We need to talk about the LGBTQ community. They're not even mentioned or humanized at all, which leads to bullying.
Yeah.
And we just need to start helping our society understand this. Like, it's almost like all of a sudden kids wake up and they have this weapon inside of them and it's been activated and they don't have any idea how to use it, but it's dangerous.
Yeah, right.
And there's no guidance or manual. And then they ask about it, like, what is this weapon? And you go, no, you're too young.
Don't talk about that. Yeah.
It's like, they're not too young. It's been activated. You don't get to decide they're too young. When they bring it up, it's been activated.
Right. When nature activates it, it's time to talk about it. And
totally.
It's no brainer. Yeah. I think.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And like, we don't get to determine what the timeline is. It's different for everyone. So at the time, I'm friends with a documentary filmmaker, Sean Dunne, and it was just like, when you get an idea and it lights you up.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a documentary about that and get it turned into a series. I had a very specific idea of what it would look like. He loved the idea. He said, I'll executive produce it if you want to make that. And so I started working on it, and I team taught to be able to do both. So I taught 3 days a week. And even with the 3 days a week, I just started to feel really sad going to work. Like, started to feel I was more tuned in with what I wasn't able to do than what I was doing. Like, no progress felt like enough. Like, I would maybe rehabilitate the behavior of a student in a way that was wonderful in the classroom. And then I would learn that he was still going home and being an absolute monster to his family. Stuff like that started to become like brighter and louder than the improvements I was making.
Sure.
And
it's hard to separate yourself from that. I know. Right?
It was impossible for me.
How can you not personalize it? Of course.
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, that was a battle I fought throughout the whole 8 years, but, I don't want to say that it got the best of me, but I do want to say that I made a decision to no longer be part of the system that I actively hated everything about.
Right.
And that was forcing me to fail my students. I was going in there and like working my ass off and like killing myself to do everything that I could within a system that made sure that no matter what I did, I was still going to fail them.
Right. And up until that point, maybe you were of the mentality that, well, I can fight from within.
Absolutely.
I can change from within.
Yeah.
Right?
I made a lot of changes from within. I did, you know, I think I did things in that classroom that were remarkable, and I'm proud of those things. Right. But
yeah. No. So yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that, the original thread was like, talking about the models of the school systems and stuff. And look, I mean, now you left this pretty like, working in a school district and teacher. That's a track career.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you left and you created this new model for yourself, and you just do a whole bunch of shit now. I mean, you make films.
Yeah. I edit that to say I am trying to create a new model for myself. I don't feel successful at it yet because I have no idea how to support myself.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I went back to, what's interesting is I went back to subbing to make money.
Yeah.
And I was like, I went back into a really difficult environment, which I won't even get into, but let's just say things had gotten worse in some really sad ways, on the campus and in the classroom that I taught in. And all of my really nihilistic, negative, defeating, / suicidal thoughts came back, ones that I hadn't felt for like months being out of it. And I went, oh my God, this is where that shit came from. And so it sort of reiterated the fact that the right thing for me to do is to find a path away from it and continue on that path away from it. And yeah, I'm cobbling together a life, and I've got a lot of projects I'm working on. It'll just be however many years until money starts attaching itself to those things.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the brain being ready to read sort of thing.
Yeah.
Things birth when they birth.
You're right.
As long as you keep doing it.
Yeah.
The sex ed thing, though, an abrupt right turn, or back to it for a second.
Yeah.
So sure, like the dysfunction especially in the West, and I mean, these days, the access of pornography, and I'm not anti-porn at all, but I am anti sort of like, how it becomes the model for healthy sexuality.
Exactly.
Which is weird.
Well, we should talk about it and just tell the kids that it's entertainment and that it's not, that's not what sex is.
Right.
Or it can be if you want to do that, but let's tell you all the things about it that are false. Cause I remember wanting to see porn cause I wanted to know what sex was. They just don't know that you're not supposed to copy it.
Right.
So we just need to talk about it. It's a movie. Movies are,
Sure. They're entertainment.
They're entertainment. They're fictionalized.
So but here's the what I kind of view as just the great schism in human sexuality in America, in that pornography on one end, and as we know, and every time, Pornhub and all these sites, they put out all their data every year about who's watching and where it's coming from. And we know it's 30 to 40% women. Yeah. Which blows everyone away. Yeah. And as far as per capita goes, poor Southern red states watch the most porn, and also watch
gay porn.
And gay porn.
I just read a study about this, and it also said that the top search for men was like adult breastfeeding. I don't know if we read the same one. That was really funny.
I missed that one. Holy shit. Yeah, but anyway, but the point is that like secretly, it seems that most of America is, and the key word being secretly, is like pretty kinky and into some, it's pretty twisted, has a very repressed, just sort of, view on it. And I say repressed because they keep it so secret. Yet on the other hand, we still have a very mainstream, puritanical sort of view on sexuality and the subjugation of women and the demonification of it and all of these things. So somehow there's these opposite polarities and they create this atmosphere of completely unhealthiness. I
think I know a couple of reasons why that exists.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to say is, so I'm not sure if we read the same study. I'll send you the one I read. I think it was on Vox, but it was interesting about porn searches. And it was a guy who was studying human sexuality, and he found that he was like the first sexual psychologist who had actually asked porn sites specifically for their data, or the porn sites he asked for their data said that they had never been asked for their data before. And he was like, why aren't people going to this source when that to me seems logical? That's where you would want to go to find out what it is people like. But don't you also think that there's a disconnect between the type of porn that someone watches and the type of sex that they're having?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, probably. Yes.
And there even could be a disconnect between the type of porn that they're watching and the type of sex that they would have if they were even given the opportunity. Like, not that they might like watching a certain thing, but they just like don't have that in front of them, so they wouldn't do it. But also, if it were available to them, they might be like, no, actually, that's terrifying. I just like to watch it. Because fetishizing,
right. Yeah, sure. Especially around fetish behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of like, if you're a man and you watch gay porn, does that mean, I also, sexuality is such a spectrum, and I believe that we're all...
Everybody's 15% gay.
There you go.
Right.
I believe that's very true, but does that mean that you would have gay sex even if you haven't been given the opportunity? I don't know. So I think those questions are fair to ask.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a huge disconnect because there's a huge disconnect between the way that our culture privately engages with sex and the way that we publicly talk about sex, because we are not a culture that teaches anyone to be in tune with themselves in any way. This was another thing that really bothered me as a teacher, and something that I was able to implement my last year before leaving, which was, why aren't we teaching anybody to understand their emotions and harness their emotions and deal with what it feels like to be alive? Why? Because if kids are struggling internally and have like raging anxiety and all myriad issues, right? Are they going to be available to learn math? No. They're freaking the fuck out about whatever else,
fucking calculus is the least of their concerns.
Right. And a lot of kids come from abusive homes, and that number is like rapidly rising. And kids people are having kids younger and younger, and obviously socioeconomic, everyone's struggling, everyone's struggling to survive. So, and I say that generally, but that was true for the majority of families at the schools that I've taught at. So it's like, I think if we taught kids how to understand themselves and tune in with themselves, and gave cognitive behavioral strategies at a young age, gave mindfulness strategies at a young age, then there wouldn't be such a disconnect in the things that we do privately and the things that we do publicly, because we would all just be more comfortable with what it is to be a fucking human being.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Another thing that I think needs to be normalized.
And, specifically in this line of thinking, so much of it has to do with body consciousness. I think so much of like the sexual disconnect, and and you said, people, if they were given the opportunity to have sex, like maybe they fantasize about, a lot of it is also just body shame. Totally.
Yeah.
It's like, unless you look exactly like that, you feel like shit.
Yeah.
And that is we're not doing better at that.
No.
We're doing worse.
Yeah.
And part of as much of a technologist as I am, but the proliferation of, sort of glossy sheen perfection of media has created this disconnect, and
totally,
it's tough.
It's probably similar to like why, you know, Scarlett Johansson is casting Ghost in the Shell though, right? Because it's still an industry that wants to make money and they're going just by numbers. She
looks great in the bodysuit.
Right. And
she does.
Right. She looks great in it. Yeah. And we all love her already. We want to watch her. Are they getting as many clicks on the, like, let's watch like a regular looking couple normally make love to one another?
Right.
No. So, you know, and they're all, you know, I don't know why people go into porn in a general way, but a lot of it is, you know, it's a money-making industry. Let's just say that. So they are wanting to. Oh,
you don't know why people get into the business, you mean?
I don't want to say that I know why every individual gets into it, is what I just mean. I just want to be careful about that. But, but it's a money-making industry, and so, you know, they're focused on making money.
Yeah, I guess. But at a certain point, I wonder that too. I keep meaning to have an adult performer on the podcast. I've been trying, and I'm in touch with a couple just to, you know, what happens. You know? I can maybe put you in touch with, a couple people. But I'm curious. Yeah, I'm very curious as well. So where I mean, I think the solution to so much of this problem starts with parenting. You agree? I mean, where do we bridge the gap here?
I was just emailing about this morning. Yes, there has to be consistency across settings. Like, maybe I'm starting in the middle of a thought. I found that parents not having any idea how to parent was a huge issue. And like I mentioned earlier, even if I was able to make tremendous progress, it was still about that kid reaching his or her potential in an environment that was good for him or her. And then once they're taken out of that environment and they're put back into an environment that's not, which could be with the parent, then of course they're not going to be reaching their potential. So the solution to that would be, all right, let's train these parents and give them tips and tools, because there is no school and anyone can have a baby. It's very easy. You get to do this thing that feels great and then you have a baby.
Sadly.
I know. I've always said having a baby should be the result of like 5 years of paperwork.
Or at least like a fucking driving test.
I know.
At least the bare minimum.
It's so unfortunate.
It's really
so unfortunate that a baby is a product of sex. Like, I get it, because it's like, that's the...
I'm starting to go full on China though. After one kid, man, you got to fucking. I mean,
or at least just maybe make IUDs more available. Like, let's give birth control methods. Give them out.
Duncan Trussell has the best solution for this, because as fucked up as it seems, and fine, you can label me a coastal elitist, and that is fucking fine. But generally speaking, the people who have the most children are the people who shouldn't have the most children, and. Whatever, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Duncan's idea is all those people after the first kid, give them a yearly $2,000 gift card to Walmart. Instead of having the children, they could spend $2,000 a year at fucking Walmart.
And they'll take it. They have to get birth control and then get the gift card.
Got to get fixed, snips, whatever, and they'll do it.
Great idea.
Fucking Walmart, $2,000 a year, free. I'm on it.
Absolutely. And it would save everyone so much money in the long run. That's a great idea. Who can he pitch this to that can make that happen?
I know, right?
No, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I will also say, like, that is true. So, you know, people who are young and uneducated are often having more kids, and that's unfortunate for everyone in that family involved. But also, it's not easy even for educated parents, especially, speaking from my experience, if you have a kid with unique needs or a behavioral disorder or something like that. It's like, in those cases, typical behavioral motivational strategies or typical parenting tools, they literally don't work. Like, it's not intuitive. You can't do with them what you've heard other people do.
Yeah.
It's a whole different set of rules. And I even found that when these parents would say, like, how do you get him or her to do that? I can't do that at home. I'd say, oh, let me sit you. I will tell you, here's a chart. Here's exactly how you implement it. Even that isn't enough. I went to school for this. I had training. I had experience of putting it into practice, you know, for years. And it was still difficult every time, you know, like, it's raising kids, rearing kids is hard. So there would have to be some training program available truly for parents to go to to get the skills needed. But that's never that's not going to exist.
It's not going to exist.
No.
Right.
So you're either a very proactive, well-educated parent who's going to buy all the books and,
listen to all the right stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hire a therapist if you need one, like a therapist to come in and help you with whatever it is you need help with, and you're going to get your kids on the right track, or you're going to wing it and it's going to be a shit show. I don't know. I mean,
It's the eternal question. It really is. I think and it gets progressively more complicated the further we go into the future. I think back in, before the industrialized world really took form, I think it was a lot simpler. You could have kids and, there was always enough to eat, and it was a simpler life,
They run outside, they get out their energy.
Yeah. And it just was a simpler model for human existence. And now I just think it's increasingly more complicated.
Yeah.
And increasingly more expensive.
Yeah. And, what do you think about the theory that technology is turning kids into like addicts? Like they have drug addict sort of behavior where they're like lying, cheating, stealing to get like money to buy video games sort of thing, like in the same way that like an addict would to fill their fix, and is creating sort of like empathy devoid robots who don't know how to communicate.
All possibly true. I mean, I'm a recovering drug addict myself, and I'm of the belief though that the entire human condition has some manifestation of addiction, sort of manifested in it in some way, shape, or form. And in some people, it's just far more pronounced. Like me with opiates, so stay away from opiates. So it's much more pronounced. And what's happening these days with kids and technology, it's just I really view this as just a mutation of the human experience, and it's completely too early to tell. But like it or not, the train has left the station. It's way too late to turn back.
Yep.
And the fusion of again, I think it comes back down to parenting, but the fusion of millennials, merging with technology, it's just it's up to us and the general sort of narrative of society to use it for the right ways, you know, because it's not going away.
No.
So we just have to teach responsible use.
Yeah.
And because, the promise, the original sort of seedling of, say, just, social media and connectivity is about unification. It's about bringing people together.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
It used to be like, what was going on in, if you lived here in Southern California and in the year 1920, what was going on in the Middle East, that might as well have been Mars.
Sure.
Like it didn't matter. Getting there took months and ships and, it didn't matter. And now, because of all this, it's brought us all together. So in some ways it's good because we can see what our brothers and sisters are doing.
Yeah.
But got to find the balance.
Yeah. And that's up to the parents. And are they going to? I mean, then parents would have to be balanced themselves.
Yes, they will. Right. Back to the eternal question. Make them take some kind of fucking test. I don't know. But
that seems just like an unsolvable problem. And even one that, I started to champion and then gave up on when I was teaching. I was like, I'm going to do this after school parenting course. I'm going to bring parents here together and we're all going to talk and I'm going to give them strategies and stuff. The school district wouldn't allow it. And,
oh my God.
And I also found that I would do like on back to school night, I would kind of try to facilitate a conversation like that. And I would say, if anyone wants to talk about anything you're going through at home, challenges that you have, because I'm like, I know I have your students. I know that you're having your challenges. Yeah. Like, let's all talk about it together because all of you are experiencing similar things and I can give you guys tips. Does anyone want to talk about anything? And everyone was silent.
Wow.
I was like, really, guys? Like, come on, we can help each other. And they were just like, they're
goddamn fucking hippie.
Yeah, exactly.
Shut the fuck
exactly.
up.
And there's an element of shame, like it might be something that they're averse to because it feels like new agey or hippie-ish, but there's also shame in admitting like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. My kids are maniacs and, because they feel like failures and they feel like they're causing those problems. So be a parent that would like sign up even for a parenting course is admitting defeat, right? With you're failing at the most important job in the world that you chose to do. Like, it's just, there are too many hurdles. I don't know. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, great talking to you.
Yeah.
You have a website. People can go to that.
Yeah.
Ani Easton Baker.
AniEastonBaker.com. Yeah. Most of my stuff's on there. I don't have any of the documentary project like updates on there because they're all just in various states of being unfinished.
But you will soon.
But I will soon. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah. Thank you.